for the second event, second half. Super nice. I think the big difference is today we have the sun also joining us. And perfect. Yeah. Hey, please, no. Did you have the thing open? Yeah, please. As much light as possible. It's going to be winter soon. Just get it all. But if you guys need it for shooting purposes, oh, you prefer it a bit close?
Yeah, because it's shining next to me.
Okay.
It's hot.
Okay. Of course. Sorry. Yeah.
I understand that some people don't like green pictures. Just raise your hand.
Yeah, it's
Maybe
me.
one. So just try and avoid those angles.
Okay, no pictures. Great. And anybody who wants to sit in the sun can come here. Anyone who wants more Dracula can go there. Also, that's possible. These are just, like spontaneous teams. You'll be working a lot in teams today. I'm not really sure if it's going to be teams of 2 or 4. Or I don't know how you're going to do it, but we'll see. So I'm going to kick off. Like the last time, we actually ran out of time, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'll recap a little bit on what we did the last time. By the way, who is here today who hasn't either seen the video or attended the last session? So everyone,
I saw a video.
you saw the whole video?
Well, partly.
No worries, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, everyone else was here for the first session and saw the video. Great. That's kind of important. So just want to touch this. We said behavior design provides tools to extend or change human behavior. Digital technology. We went into some core concepts. We looked at what's going on with motivation. We said that it has a direction. You're either moving towards things that you want, or you're moving away from things you want to avoid. And then you also realize that motivation has a source. There's intrinsic motivations. Anybody want to tell me what intrinsic motivation is? Comes from
inside.
Can
Because
you-
it's meaningful. I mean, like, it's not because someone needs you to do that, and that's why you do that, but it's because you do that.
something that comes from inside, something that you want to do.
Like motivation comes from.
It's not that. It's not exactly that, even though you're
Get
close.
pleasure out of doing something, just
Yes.
doing that,
Yes.
without having to go have
No worries. There's no right. Don't worry about being right or wrong. But that's the point. It's important to understand that because it's tricky. Even a lot of people who work with it, they don't actually get that simple idea that when you enjoy doing something purely in the act of doing it itself, then what we call it that we say that you're intrinsically motivated. There is no external reward, there is no external incentive. You're doing it purely for the enjoyment of the activity. So a musician, I play the guitar, very basic, but I really love it, and I play for absolutely no external reward. I play alone most of the time, just for myself, and I'm really bad or basic, but I really enjoy it. And that's a very intrinsically driven kind of an activity, I would say. Whereas someone who plays, I think every musician who's good, they play because they get personally rewarded, but a lot of people play professionally because they want to, I don't know, compose a piece of art or do a performance. There is an external reward coming out of it. That would say more extrinsic, yeah? It's very important to understand. Something that comes from inside versus outside is closer to being a trigger. We will study triggers more today. And they are both, motivation and trigger are pretty related. Stay there.
Does the intrinsic motivation also related to the feeling of personal success in a way that when you are playing your guitar in your example,
Yeah,
you are sort of getting better probably?
please speak up.
Yeah, so when you are playing the guitar, you're probably getting better when you are doing that, and
Yeah.
you recognize that yourself,
Yeah.
and it gives you a little bit more motivation
Yes.
actually to do that.
Yes.
And this is like, you recognize it, and that's why you do it like more and more and more, and you like it because of that.
Yes, the motivation is the impulse or the drive to do a behavior. What you get out of doing the behavior, we call a reward. And motivations and rewards are very linked to each other. I'm going to that in the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, what you get is a reward. Why you do it is the motivation. What makes you do it is the trigger. And these three things are very related, and they're all core concepts of behavior design. A good point there. So, this is the slide. Exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's a needs theory. There are other needs theories, and essentially needs theories they point to the different kinds of rewards that human beings want out of life. It's very hard to develop any model of rewards or motivation for all of humanity. We're 7 point something billion people, all very different, but we try. So these models are not perfect, but they give us a kind of framework, thumb rules to think about these things. Yeah.
That's interesting. I read recently that Maslow himself, at the end of his career, he was saying that he regrets putting it in that order, that it should be another way around, starting from personal to material.
I don't think I'm aware he said that or something to that kind, but I'm more of the opinion that there are disparate groups. It's not like there is a hierarchy at all, or that there are dependencies at all. In my more recent thinking, I feel that these three material rewards, social rewards, and personal rewards, these three are not essentially hierarchical. But I like to represent them as hierarchical because it's a good first step to understand them. So you're driven by a source of motivation, is either intrinsic or extrinsic. You're driven in a direction of motivation, but you're also driven towards or away from rewards. And here I'm talking about positive rewards. I'm talking about something that you want positively, right? So the three levels are, or three clusters are, if you look at them as three clusters in your own mind, it's material rewards, which are typically resources, information, money. These are things that help you survive. But that's not enough. We need social rewards. These are softer, they're more psychological in nature. They are things like acceptance, belonging, being part of a community. When you say no man or no woman is an island, that's what we mean. And then you're looking at something personal, deeper, on an individual level. Who am I? What's my sense of personal worth and meaning? We're also driven to these kind of rewards, and we're motivated towards them. So our motivation kind of pushes us in the direction of reward seeking behavior. I want to go a little bit more into rewards because we did quite a lot of motivation. We're going to go into a few other stuff, but just want to touch on rewards because it's a complex subject and it's being developed more and more in areas like gaming, but also areas like retail. You will see that there are startups that are working on how to reward gamers, how to reward frequent shoppers, loyalty programs. We talked about this briefly with Rick, but we should really have that conversation more. But this is more like a psychological take on it. For example, Malcolm Gladwell, the guy who wrote Blink and Tipping Point, he has this really interesting essay where he talks about two kinds of, in my view, two kinds of motivation or two kinds of rewards. He talks about like developmental rewards and generational rewards. It's a bit heavy, just like bear with me, I'll just do this fast. So if you look at these two kinds of services, you have on the top couchsurfing, which was anybody here use couchsurfing? I know Kale does. Great. It's not paid for. You do it, it's more intrinsically motivated, You do it because you enjoy the pleasure of hosting somebody. It's not usually easy, and you show them around, but you enjoy the interaction. And Airbnb came along much later, commercialized something. Of course, Airbnb is very different as well, but and turned it into a business. But both of these coexist right now. So if you think about the rewards that people get from doing these two kinds of activities, clearly Airbnb is more on the material side, right? If you look at this, material, money, making money, Airbnb clearly lets you make money. It's one of the key reasons that people actually host on Airbnb, right? Whereas people hosting on couchsurfing are doing it much more for these non-material, personal, social rewards, higher up in this so-called spectrum. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's how different products or services can leverage the kind of rewards that an individual or participants on the platform are getting. Yeah? Now, what is developmental or generational? So instead of trying to break this down, I'll just say that as people, you'll see that people who are the typical couchsurfing host, or the largest, most number of couchsurfing hosts, are people who have the time for it. So people with kids, people with busy lives, they probably would not be couchsurfing hosts, unfortunately, because they just don't have the time to start hosting people. You will mostly see younger people, single people, students, people with older people who have an extra room but who still have adequate funds, right? So if it was an older, let's say an older single person or an older couple, and they had a couple of extra rooms in their house, they're empty nesters, the kids have left home, they have a couple of extra rooms, which one would they go for if they didn't need to make any money, if they were financially secure? What do you think? An older couple who didn't need to,
Well, couchsurfing.
probably couchsurfing, yeah? So speak up, guys, it's okay to be wrong.
It actually, I think, depends mostly of what is their goal, not in terms of like financial rewards even,
Yeah.
or is their goal to, for example,
Yeah.
get some interaction with that person who
Exactly.
is staying there.
Exactly.
And when you are doing couchsurfing, you are sort of getting that interaction more than
Yes.
you are going to Airbnb.
Yes.
And Airbnb is more of a hotel where like the host is not seeing you at all.
Absolutely.
So basically, it's not only for the guy who is or girl who is like staying there as
Yes.
a guest, but it's
Yeah.
also like for the person who is like renting the room or
Yeah.
couch, is that like it's totally different experience and they are seeking
Sure.
for totally different things.
Alright, I'm absolutely talking about the host rewards or the host motivation here. So
Yeah.
I'm very clear about that. So exactly like you said, the reason, the motivation and the driver behind using couchsurfing is so much more social and so much more personal. And even though those may be some of the rewards that people get, hosts get when they use Airbnb, Airbnb is also, that's why I've kind of posted, I've also helped friends hosts, I've been like someone who kind of welcomes the guest and shows them to the apartment on Airbnb. They really take care to make a nice experience because you want a good review and you want to keep your daily rate going, especially if you have a nice apartment. You're looking at it as a resource, right? So that's one of the things to understand is that reward can be of different kinds, and you'll be playing with that a bit today. Other things about rewards are that, there's a huge, if you want to get interested in rewards, there's a lot of psychology research. You can go into things like the interval of the reward, how often you get a reward, the time after you do the behavior that you get the reward, what reinforces the reward, and so on and so forth. I won't go into those details, but just wanted to touch upon that today. Always remember that people experience negative rewards much more intensely. Pain is always somehow harder than the equal amount of pleasure. It's behind this principle of behavioral economics called loss aversion. Losing and pain, negative rewards, punishment is always more painful. So people, if you try to change behavior by punishing people, you will kind of push them to do desperate things because people will try to avoid pain. You're not on the side of, positive motivation. Just a tip there. Then there's something called reward substitution. I just wanted to mention it, but I don't have time to go about it. You'll find videos and stuff on reward substitution. Very interesting that when you kind of pair a reward with something else, a painful reward with a positive reward, you can actually do that hard behavior. Just wanted to touch upon it. Lots to do in rewards. So motivation is very complex. Yeah, this is the thing I wanted to get across today. That don't go with your own cognitive bias about that you understand motivation, especially in an individual. It has a source, it has a direction, it's driven by rewards. Those rewards could be personal, social, they could be material. And these things change depending on the context. So all of that stuff actually gets factored into your behavior design work. The two ways to change behavior, which I touched upon the last time, one was align with motivation. That's the best way to help people change in ways they want to change. Align with existing motivation and create an action that they can do, and then essentially create dissonance, create a state of discomfort which they have to resolve through doing an action, which is also used all the time, even though it's a little bit devious or quite devious depending on the intervention. Yeah.
Maybe you talked about it last time, but what does this aligning with the existing motivation actually means in practice?
I will
Can you
actually,
give some examples?
I don't know if I have an example here, but I'll try to take it when I show the canvas.
Okay.
There's a whole piece on that.
Right.
Thanks. Good point. Another thing is that motivation and moment. I just came up with this morning, but please remember those two synonymously. A researcher called B.J. Fogg has the example of motivation waves. Very interesting concept. Why is it that let's say you want to run, you want to go to the gym, and you go and you sign up to the gym. Why is it that you wake up one morning absolutely ready to go? You hit the shower or you don't hit the shower if you're going to the gym. It depends on your style, but you wake up one morning and you absolutely go for the gym, and the next day you just don't. All things being more or less equal. Why are we under-motivated and over-motivated? That's the puzzle of motivation. Because motivation is so contextual. It depends on what email you got last night. It depends on how much you slept. It depends on what you ate. It depends on what you have to do today. That action, that behavior of going to the gym or doing the 50 pull-ups or doing the yoga, these hard behaviors, or learning a new language, putting the 20 minutes, is so much about the moment. So we make the plan, but when the time comes, actually doing that behavior is terribly hard. And those are where rewarding, incentives, nudging, all of that behavior change is great. So this is a map of 4 kinds of moments that Google came up with in one of their white papers. Something called research from Google, or research with Google, or something like that. Think with Google. Thinkwithgoogle.com. Very good research resource where they research. Google puts all their kind of, all their learning from searches and stuff onto white papers. This one is on travel, and they've come up with 4 kinds of moments. I want to get away. So they say that we have 4 kinds of distinct moments when we when we live our travel experiences. One of them is I want to get away moments. This happens every time. I think maybe Kala is having it right now a little bit when we were talking about, like, Kala, are you going to Japan or are you going to South America? And the other day, and he was like, I need to go. And he's feeling this impulse of, he travels like a lot, this guy. I admire that. And this I want to get away moments. There is that moment, you're just in the middle of a meeting or writing an email and you're like, damn, I need to go. Yeah. And your travel experience has already started there, right? Which is then, they're dreaming moments. You dream. You look at Instagram, you say, wow, damn, that amazing temple in Japan. I want to go see that. Or that amazing garden. Something else, right? Then you actually, at some points, you might flip from there to planning moments, actually concretely planning. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to do with this person. Then you book, let's book at moments, and then can't wait to explore when you're actually there. So your motivation can be very much a product and outcome of the moment that you're in as well. And user experience designers, product designers will know about user journeys. It's cool if you can break up your user journeys down into moments where you can then isolate the motivation and the reward, and then design services that intercept human beings in that moment and help them get the rewards they want. Just want to mention that as well. Moments up. Yes?
Can you elaborate a little bit about motivation as an outcome and motivation as a trigger?
Yeah, they are, for me, motivation and trigger are not to be confused. They are both 2 different things.
Yes.
So I would like to even though in real life all these things get mixed, or the behavior is an output of all of these. It's a synthesis of these. But conceptually, I would request you to hold motivation as a concept, trigger as a concept, and reward as a concept. But motivation being the essential drive, the reason behind why you do things, your motivation clearly impacts the kinds of triggers that you respond to, and motivation also clearly informs the kinds of rewards that you're seeking. Motivation influences those 2 other things. It's like the sun and those are planets or something, But they are 3 different things, 3 different concepts, yeah. And we will go both into triggers and rewards today a bit more, especially in your practical work, so you have fun. These moments are called micro moments by Google. I've actually used them in a couple of projects. I like that word. Google defines them as intent-rich moments when decisions are made and preferences shaped. In these moments, user expectations are higher than ever. So the user is loaded with expectations in these moments. So how can we build technology, services that anticipate the moment, the expectation of the user and serve that user? That would be, where behavior design in digital is going. Yeah. Just stop me for questions, guys. Any questions here before I jump into a couple of models? Okay. This is probably, so all of this stuff till now were concepts. They were loose, discrete psychology concepts. We spoke about motivation, we spoke about rewards, we spoke about triggers and a few other things. Now we will actually go to a couple of frameworks and models. Yeah? And this one is probably the most successful one. It's called the B is equal to MAT or fog model behind the researcher who created it. It's fascinating, it's widely used. The creator of this model, he created something called the Stanford Persuasive Tech Lab, and he's something of a cult figure, a guru, especially in the Valley. I am more for validating models yourself. I don't think you should just adopt a model because it's popular, but you should put it into practice and really see if it works for your context. And I'm sure there's going to be more and more, but this one is, I really like it because it's handy, it works, makes sense, etc., etc. And it's been applied widely at companies such as Facebook, Instagram, whatever. It's all over the place now, very popular. And it uses the same concepts that we have been talking about. Yeah. So should I go through this? Is everyone here? Frame of mind. Anyone want coffee? Everyone's good. Cool. Excellent. Because this is the core stuff behind what we're doing today. This model tries to explain why any behavior happens. Not digital, not analog, but just anything. Why do we do anything? Yeah? And the model basically says that you need three elements for any human behavior to happen. We're only talking about human behavior here, not animal or machine behavior for the moment. You need three things is what Fogg says. You need motivation, which we already spoke about. Yeah? You need sufficient motivation, but then you also need sufficient ability. Yeah? You should be able to do the behavior. But then you just don't need these two, you also need something called a trigger. Yeah? So I'll go a little bit more slowly. The motivation again is the drive that we spoke about. The reason, the drive, the push to do the behavior. That's what and then ability is essentially, there's these 6 factors that is part of the model. But ability is being able to, if you're not able to do that behavior, if there is a lack of ability in doing that behavior, then you're probably not going to be able to do it. So I like to take the example of a coffee shop, for example. Let's say you're walking past a coffee shop in the morning, yeah? And typically, how could we apply this model there? In order for you to go in and get a cup of coffee, right? You may need, you will need the motivation to do it. If you're not aware of coffee, or if you're not a coffee drinker, and you're not feeling the desire for coffee, you probably will not go in for coffee. So let's say you have the motivation to get coffee. You also need the ability. Breaking this down very simply. If you can't open the door of the coffee shop, if the machine is not working, if you don't have the money to buy coffee, if the person to serve the coffee is not there, if there are no coffee beans, number of things, you don't have the ability to actually do that behavior, you will not be able to do that behavior, right? And that's what these things stand for. He breaks down ability into these things, into these elements. Time, money, physical effort, mental effort. If it's too complex, the reason we don't do certain behaviors is because it's too complex to do the behavior. Non-routine is that many times we don't do behaviors that are not routine. It's much more easy to do habitual routine behavior. And the last is deviance. We don't do things that are looked down by others. If it's socially deviant, socially awkward, if it's weird, we don't do certain things, right? So we've got sufficient. Yeah.
How is non-routine different from the effort?
Effort is purely physical effort. So let's say someone's in a wheelchair and they don't have the ability, they have the money, they're mentally fine, but that person is unfortunately not able to get into the store. That's it.
What if I'm used to taking a certain route to my workplace, and I know that there is a set of stairs that I can take, and it will take some physical effort from me, but it's also like non-routine for me to go there. So like
Like
I'm avoiding that because of these two components, and I'm just wondering what is the difference.
Non-routine, so basically the idea of routines or non-routine comes from habit psychology, which tells us that more than 50% of daily behavior is habitual, which means we do it with very little conscious thought. Like brushing your teeth, wearing your shoes, the clothes you wear, a lot of behavior is just programmed into us. We learn over time. So when we need to break out of a routine, you need to pay extra attention to it, you have to put mental effort into it, and that acts as a barrier, creates friction to doing that behavior. Of course, it's very possible that you can overcome all of these. It's
Could it
like,
be
you
that
don't
the-
have money 1 second, you go to the ATM or you top up your bank account, you suddenly have the ability to pay. So the chance of doing the behavior goes up.
Could it be that the effort is different from this non-routine factor in the way that you acknowledge this effort that you need to take, and with non-behavior stuff you just don't know, like you're not aware of these alternatives that you...
Yes, absolutely. Non-routine has that huge black, unknown part of it. How do you know something that's not routine, right? So when you're designing a behavioral intervention, as you will see on the canvas, a lot of times you will, and I'll get to this point. You'll see why your question is absolutely spot on. But absolutely, these two are special for me from the others, in that the others, it's just a question of have or have not. I don't have the time for this. You have the knowledge, you have the understanding that you can and want to do the behavior, but you don't have these resources. Whereas these two, you really need to be aware that, there's a different way to do it. Yeah? Social deviance is a nice one. I think there's a thing of, Fogg in one of his interviews, he describes it as you don't show up in a toga to or a bathroom, bathrobe to a, I don't know, like a party where everyone else is wearing tuxedos, right? You just don't do that. It's bizarre. So even if I incentivized you to say, hey, please show up in a bathrobe, because it's so socially deviant, you have the ability to do it, you can wear the bathrobe, no one's going to throw you out, you still won't go because it's just socially you, right? So you need to consider these abilities. But then you need a third element, you need a trigger. When you have enough motivation along all those dimensions we spoke about, and you have the ability to actually do the behavior, you still need something called a trigger. A trigger is a cue that says do the behavior now. All your notifications are trying to be triggers. And you have two kinds of triggers. There are internal triggers and there are external triggers. Yes, ma'am. Sir. Yeah.
Can we close the
Yes.
button because our table is suffering pretty much from the sun
No
and
problem.
problems?
Just do it. Just do it. Yeah. We'll leave this one, please. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that cool? So, yeah, I just realized my hair and my skin, all of this it's much better with more sunshine, especially living up here. But internal and external triggers. There's also a lot of research into trigger psychology. Internal triggers come from inside you, and this is connected to what Kate was saying earlier. Or, I'm sorry, you were saying there. Yeah, sorry, you were talking about this impulse, right? An internal trigger is this call to action to do a behavior which comes from within you, things like hunger. The drive for all our usual physical drives, hunger, sex, all kinds of physical stuff. It's all internally triggered. No one has to kind of trigger them from outside. But then you have external triggers. A car that honks at you is a trigger to, hey, get out of my way. A friend saying, dude, do you want to go for lunch? External trigger. The smell of coffee in the case of walking past a coffee shop, that's a very strong trigger. The smell of a good confectionery or bakery, all of us know when we walk past, we're like, wow, that's an external trigger. So there's a theory that most successful products, digital products, start off as external triggers and over time become internal. And this is some of the core thinking behind addiction of technology, which is being explored more now. So essentially when Facebook came along, remember we would be like, well, whatever. And then we were like, oh, this is cool. And then you had your first notifications. What the hell? You actually had this thing on your iPhone a little layover on the home screen which said, ping, Carla has texted you. And you went in to check. That was an external trigger prompting a behavior, right? But today you wake up and you check Facebook. You open up Facebook to see who has been prompting me. What used to be a behavior trigger from the outside is now coming from within you. Like the smell, like the urge for coffee. So the smell of coffee was an external trigger, but if I'm just sitting here and I say, man, I really feel like a coffee, that's from inside. Yeah? So products, digital products and services can take advantage of internal triggers that you already have, or they can create internal triggers in you by first positioning them as external triggers and then moving those triggers inside over a period of time. This would be the dream of all growth-based services like social media and so on.
Is the explanation for that just habit? Or is there something else that explains when an external trigger becomes an internal one?
What explains it? I don't know. I mean, psychologists, researchers are talking about an itch that you have to scratch, or it's the vitamin versus the painkiller effect. So it seems to be that external triggers are more like, products that start out as external triggers are nice to have. They have vitamin-like appeal to us, where we say, that's nice, it could give me a boost, but it's an option. It's not something, you can ignore it and walk away and it's fine, right? There's also the concept of hot triggers, which could be internal or external, but the idea is that the trigger is so immediate, it's so demanding that you pretty much attend to it. Yeah? And then a painkiller effect is when the trigger is typically internal. And it can happen. So, and absolutely it's a part of habit creation. That movement from the external to the internal is clearly what habit formation, is a big part of forming a habit. For example, let's say an app or a service or a coach who wants to get you to run regularly. He or she would have to start off with external triggers first, where probably calls you every morning with an incentive, right? What do you like? Maybe you like some Vietnamese coffee that you can't get here in Helsinki, let's say. I'm sure you can get it, but something like exotic. I buy a pack of this coffee when I'm in Vietnam. I bring it down. Say, Kathy, call you every morning. When you meet me for a run, I'll get you a flask. So I kind of reward you, right? I start with an external trigger, but a month later, if you're waking up and you're calling me like, Ash, are you ready to go? You've internalized that trigger. And that would have moved you further towards habit formation. Habit formation is very tricky. There's a lot of research into how it happens. Habits can be formed and then they might just crash overnight. Or they might just dissipate and fade away. But yes, great question. So yeah, this was just a picture of a coffee shop, and I just wanted to contextualize. I should have put it here, but put it already, but anyways. Beautiful looking place though. It's like a kind of place where you just want to sit down anyways. Doesn't matter, yeah? Any questions on triggers? Any questions on this model before I go ahead? So there's a threshold, clearly, where enough motivation, the right ability, and then the right trigger, boom, the likeliness of you doing the behavior is increased.
In this model, where would be the success point? Like that I can make it, that I'm doing something?
Above that curve.
Yeah, because it looks like that, and
Yeah.
like where it is, because okay, this trigger fails, for example.
So that's exactly why that's a fantastic question. Never had that before. So the point here is that if you have a lot of motivation, you will manage with very little ability. So these two trade off. If you have a lot of ability and low motivation, and if you have a good trigger, you might still do the behavior. And that's the kind of genius behind this model.
Does it mean
So that's the reason why a lot of behavior change efforts are directed at just reducing or giving you the ability to do it, or reducing the kind of effort. Make it easy for for someone to do and trigger the behavior, and the likelihood of the behavior going up is more, which I think is, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'm probably more on the motivation side. I'm more like, this is where human values are. The reason we should do things as human beings is because we are motivated to do that. They are in our interests. You know, we shouldn't be doing things just because it's easy to do. Unfortunately, I think we live in a culture, and a lot of digital products and services, we use them because they're easy to do. It's so easy to check Instagram and see what's there rather than call and talk to your friend. Your ability to reach your friend is a lot less. You have to call, the person has to hear it, they have to pick it up, they have to be free, you know? So, does it make any sense? Sure. Another question you had.
No. Now I understood, because this one, the trigger fails.
Yeah.
I just it confused me a little bit, because I thought that this ping thing represents the success, but I think
Right.
now that everything that outside of this trigger fails
Correct.
thing
Is failure.
success actually. So
Exactly, on the
Yeah,
top,
okay.
on the top, yeah. All this too little ability, motivation, sorry, ain't gonna happen.
yeah.
According to this model. Yes.
What about like if someone has a fear to do something?
I would say that it's a, you know, I
He
would
might have an ability.
somewhere
might-
between these two. It's somewhere between in this area. Your fear is either it's too hard, I can't understand it, so I won't do it, or it's just too hard for me to do, or someone will think I'm an idiot, or it's just not how I'm used to doing it, right? You need to break down the fear. Why are you afraid to do something? Probably has to do with one of these things.
Okay.
Yeah. So the cool thing about, or the interesting, important thing to understand that these things add to your ability, and the reason you don't do a behavior is because of the lack of one of these things. The chances of the behavior not happening is lack of time, lack of money, lack of effort. So in order to get people to do that behavior, amplify the ability, which is exactly what the canvas is all about.
Because many of our fears are sort of generated by some past experiences that can like
Yes.
come from even like as long as like childhood.
Sure.
And obviously like we are developing.
Yes.
But many people have this problem of like fearing of doing some particular thing because of the childhood experiences, although
Trauma.
they are like more than able and more than motivated to do them, but they
Yes.
still can't push
Exactly.
themselves to do that.
You have to
So-
give them the ability to do it. Is how I would
Yeah,
go
so
about
in
it.
that case, this is sort of does not fit there very well.
Like I said, it's probably not. It's not a perfect science that works for everybody. It's just a
Okay.
framework. Yeah.
Can an ability also be a trigger? I'm thinking sort of money. Because the price could trigger you to do something, but it's
Absolutely.
also an ability.
Absolutely. So in that
Well, how
case,
does
it
that work?
turns around,
Okay.
isn't it? I mean, those two concepts turn around. So if I am doing something because I save money, or I'm getting a cash incentive to do it, then that's the reward, right? That's a reward. It could also be the trigger. So I'm building the reward into the trigger and saying, hey dude, do this now and save 20 euros now. I will still need the ability to be able to do it. I should be able to push the button, see the option, sign in, pick up the voucher. whatever.
The last
Yeah.
graph had me laughing
So
at
it's-
certain behaviors of my own, so yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a really, really good question, because there is nothing that's essentially a trigger, or essentially a reward, or essentially motivation. There are ways, there are the conditions you need for the behavior to happen, but the voucher itself could be a motivator, it could be a reward, it could be a trigger. The notification itself could be anything, but when you get the framework, then you can use the tool, use those things in the right way. Very good question.
Another question, please.
Yes.
I was trying to apply this system to a situation that I saw in the TV series that I'm watching, and it brought up a question of like, if the trigger can be negative. The situation in the series
Yeah.
was that the guy was really smart, and he lived in the ghetto with like a large family.
Yeah.
And he was motivated to get out of the ghetto and help out his family.
Yeah.
He was smart enough to do so. So the motivation is very clear, and the ability is also like present.
Yeah.
But he was triggered by like his girlfriend nagging him and
Yes.
his like family pushing him,
Yes.
and he didn't go. But then the guy from the college came out.
Whoa, stop. His girlfriend nagging him and his family pushing him, and he didn't go. I thought he would leave because those were triggers that made him leave.
No, it made him like rebellious. He didn't want to give in and just do whatever like the others were telling him to do.
Okay.
So actually the sort of like another type of trigger worked on him when the guy from college came and challenged him, and he said like
Exactly.
you couldn't get in anyway
That's
based
right.
on your essay.
Yeah.
And he was like, it wasn't written by me, it was written by my stupid girlfriend. And so then he was motivated to go because
Yes.
he was challenged.
Absolutely. That's a really good example.
But it means that the triggers can also be like positive and negative.
Of course they can be. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Think about it. A trigger. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like that the trigger, those triggers were not enough for him to make that move.
I think the reward.
Or maybe not like motivation, but maybe he didn't have enough motivation to actually do that because he had ability and a family and girlfriend were not nagging, and well, this wasn't actually his motivation. So like that's why he didn't do it. And the motivation was different, to prove somebody's wrong, to prove that he's smart enough.
Okay, guys. This is no. Listen. This is so freaking good that this is exactly what you're going to work on for your exercise, and I will contextualize it a little bit more. Yeah, that's exactly the conversation. Just hold on to that because that's what we're going to do today.
Then quick final question. What's more
Yes, sir.
important, the motivation, the ability, or the trigger?
You need all of these things for
But
behavior
what's
to
the most
happen.
important?
For me, it's motivation. I'm a big fan of the impulse from the inside for whatever reasons to do whatever. If you don't have that, it's like the wind in the sails of behavior and behavior change. I think motivation for me. Yeah, it's primary. But different researchers will think differently. To be honest, yeah, there are lots of people, lots of researchers who think it's not about motivation. It's about giving them the ability to do things and triggering them, or creating the right triggers. And all kinds of people will do things they didn't plan to do, and so on. Okay, then the second model. The first was, what was the first model called?
Fog.
The fog model, or the BMAT. B is equal to MAD. Okay, remember that? That's a cool model. The second is the habit loop, popularized by Nir Eyal in his book Hooked, but also, in Charles Duhigg before, and habit loops have been studied in behavioral science for a long time. This is a 4-step habit loop. There's also 3-step habit loops that are really simpler. I'll go with this one because this is newer, hotter, and it's also really good. So habits, Kathy had asked. So psychology research breaks down any habit into 4 steps. You have a trigger. We just spoke about triggers. Then you have an action, the behavior that the human being does. And then you have something called a reward. So as a result of that action, you do a reward. And then there is investment, which is a little bit of extra work that the user does or the human does, which kind of feeds into creating a habit. Don't worry about investment right now. It's more complex. I would just think of those 3 steps. And that's a habit loop. Another kind of habit loop is called the cue, the routine, and the reward. That's an older version of the habit loop. A cue is a trigger, the routine is the action. But is that action a routine, or is it just a new action? So I prefer calling it an action or a behavior. And the last piece is the reward. You do it in anticipation. When you do this repetitively, over a period of time, certain frequency, you're essentially getting what you call a habit. And habits are being studied like intensely right now. Not just studied, but experimented with. I'm sure Facebook is experimenting on your habits right now. For example, but everyone else is. I'm not trying to point out that there's one evil company, but anyone who can do that, research that, is studying it now, because clearly your long-term loyalty towards products, brands, is all about if you can form habits around them. That's understood now. And it's been understood in the past as well by people who built railroads and businesses that built anything, from people who sold you salt to to mortgage, to cigarettes or whatever, that it's your recurring behavior, it's recurring revenue from you. Have you come back? Retailing, for example. There's no point if you can't, that's why you have loyalty cards, loyalty points. They don't want you for just to be a single-time customer. They want you to form a habit around their product or service. So these are the 4 steps. And based on these 2 models, the BMAT model and the habit loop, and the concepts in those models, I will now show you a framework that I've developed called the Behavior Design Canvas. Since I've been working a lot with canvases are kind of handy, and lots of startup people, product people understand canvases. I created a canvas called the Behavior Design Canvas, and today you'll be working with this tool. Yeah? And you'll understand this tool now because of all the stuff we've gone through. And that's what it is. Any questions on the habit loop? Okay. We can ask just ask any questions anytime. We have the Behavior Design Canvas is a process or a framework to target and change behavior. And you're essentially doing it in 3 phases. The first phase is targeting. That's these 2 boxes here. The second phase, the second step is to align 2 more boxes here. And the last is to shape the behavior. I'll go into them really fast. The first step is to go from a current behavior or a present behavior. And what is behavior again, guys? It's action that you want someone to do, typically through digital technology. Okay? Today you can think about it just action that you want people to do. You want to target what is the desired behavior you want someone to do. This could be anything from dress differently, call cabs differently, eat differently, date differently. And I must say that if you're building a business or a product that through which you want to change people's behavior, you don't have to necessarily think of change as getting them to do something completely different. It's just getting them to do it a bit differently or getting them to do it with your product. So one of the startups that I got very kind of fascinated with recently is a company called WAG. And they raised $365 million in SoftBank as a venture round. They're a dog walking startup, right? It's unbelievable. 365 million or something. A dog walking startup. So it's just like you can be an Uber driver, you can be a dog walker. So you sign up on this platform, and if you have half an hour a day, you get a little training, and then Kate wants me to walk her dog. She's busy today. I show up, I have keys to her home. I'm vetted by my company, so it's all insured. I take your doggy out. I strap a smart cape on him. Would I call it a cape? Some kind of a thing that the dog wears, and then I walk the dog along on the route that you would want me to walk him. And that cape is connected to Wi-Fi, so it's tagged. So you can actually see on your app at work where Ash, who you know, just like the Uber driver, who's got a 4.9 rating, I'm fine, hopefully, is walking with your dog in the middle of Hietsu Symmetry, and maybe even knows when your dog takes a poop. But that's a dog walking startup. What is that doing? That's essentially extending a behavior that Kate already does. Kate does that. She comes back from work, takes her doggy out for a walk. It's creating a behavioral extension where it's given Kate a tool to extend that behavior through Ash to walking her dog. So don't think of behavior change as this kind of, present behavior, Kate walks dog. Desired behavior, we want Kate to let Ashwin or a walker walk her dog. It can be as simple as that. Today, companies can take this and work on it for 3 months. So to get somewhere, they should. If you're a real products company. So don't worry about being perfect today and don't stress. Just have fun with it. Just fool around, get to know it, yeah? So typically, the desired behavior you want to create is based on some sort of business goal or revenue model. You want some data, you want to monetize that behavior in some way. You want to charge the user, etc. First step. Second step is that whole intent, the motivation part. Yes, we want Kate to, let Ash walk the dog. Does Kate want that? Are you motivated to do it? if you are someone who believes that the whole reason I have a dog is so that I can spend quality time with my dog and walk my dog, then it's going to be very hard to convince you to let someone else walk your dog. You'll be like, what's the point of owning a dog if I start compromising on my dog, on the time I spend with my pet? If I start letting some guy walk my dog. So I would put that kind of behavior, that kind of attitude in this no box, in which case you don't have motivation for the user, I'm sorry to use the word user, customer, to do the behavior. So what you need to do is amplify motivation. You need to use persuasion techniques. You need to change the attitude of the person. You need to gamify the experience. These are only 3, I have a couple more, but these are just examples. The motivation of the customer is not on your side to actually do that behavior that you want them to do. You're in a good place if your customer, or most of your customer, your market is in this box, where they already have the motivation to do it, then all you need to do, according to Fogg's model, is amplify the ability. They are already motivated to adopt your product or service. Why are they not doing it? Because there's a lack in one of these. It's a very good start. They don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, something else. It's too complex. They don't understand. How the hell do I use this app? If you look at most apps, why are they not being adopted, or products? When I say apps, guys, I mean everything. SaaS, B2B, I just mean any software that people use to get things done. The reason they don't get adopted is because they suffer somewhere, or in many cases in multiple areas. It's too expensive, it's too complex to understand, it kind of clashes with your current routine, etc. Right? So, step 2 would be align the motivation of the user with the, align the behavior that you want people to do with their motivation. If they are aligned, then all you need to do is amplify the ability. If they're not aligned, you need to amplify motivation in the first place and then amplify ability. You need both. And the last step would be making that behavior a pattern, which is more long-term, which is where the habit loop comes in. And in that case, you need to trigger the behavior, you need to reward the behavior, and you need to define the behavior, which is an action. Trigger it, define exactly what the hell is it you want that person to do on your app, which then leads to an external behavior. And the last piece would be actually reward them, incentivize them. A lot of times we do things on apps and we don't get a reward, and that's why we stop using them. And a lot of times we don't do things because it's not clear what should I do. Yeah, so that's a 3-piece. It's a canvas. I have printouts. The idea is that you will all take a canvas for your team, and you will actually work on a case that I've kind of designed for you guys. Yes. Do some behavior change. No, one, just 5 minutes, because I just kind of set the challenge up.
One per table?
One per table. You just work on one, guys. Yeah, all of you. So one person. That's So yeah, you have one behavior design canvas on your table. Doesn't have to be too exhaustive. Take it easy. One person can do the writing. So you create one canvas per table. The idea is that it's just a framework for you to talk and discuss these concepts a lot. Doesn't have to be perfect at all. Use post-its if you want to put ideas down, stuff like that. So the context for the the exercise is that I essentially read an article. The last time we talked about hippies and hipsters, and I thought I've been very fascinated about hipsters in general in the past. I mean, hipster is a term from the 50s already, and I've read a lot of beat poetry in my time and stuff like that. And angel-headed hipsters were already around then, and then hippies came out of hipsters. So it's a pretty cool cultural phenomenon to study as a social psychologist. And this was an article that was written very recently by a philosopher and sociologist, which I blogged about. The reign of hackers, hipsters, and hippies. Super nice, honest thing. publication called Meta Moderna. This idea called cultural capital has been around for a while. A guy called Richard Florida, he created the term the creative class. He talked about a shift to the creative class. And this guy has gone a bit deeper into that and said, modern society will be in a large sense forged or shaped by these three kinds of people. So today I thought I can have you working with hippies, hipsters, and hackers. Yes. So let me read a little bit about each of them. A hacker is not just the person who illegally gains access to computer systems. The hacker are referred to, self-identified, like Zuckerberg, or not, people who participate in hackathons. Hackers produce digital solutions and software that reduce the complexity of society and make it manageable. Only the ones who combine their IT and programming skills with an intimate embodied knowledge of digital culture can be considered as such. They combine software development with cultural capital and social capital with a sensitive knowledge of the culture and age we live in and a rich understanding of its symbols. Okay, he's a philosopher, so it's a bit heavy, but you get the idea. Technologists who use technological tools to mess and shape society, move things forward. How many of you would identify with being a hacker? You can be more than one, so don't stress, just like, hands up, I want to see the hackers here. Self-identified hackers, come on. I didn't know you coded, Rick, I have no idea.
No, but I'm looking to combine coding with
Excellent.
some.
Absolutely. Even if you're an aspirational hacker, you don't have, who do you identify with? Hackers, one more time. I'm not so much of a hacker, but one more time. 3, this is important. It's important. The reason it's important is because, I'll tell you later. Okay. The second is hipster. Actually, someone said I'm a hipster, and I'm like, yeah, I do have a lot of hipster characteristics. But I also have a lot of hippie characteristics, so no one is, none of us are anywhere, it's just one archetype. But anyways, hipsters are people with a particular style of fashion, or the pretentious to show off. They're just, I'm sorry, it should be not just, I edited that. It's not just people with a particular style of fashion, or pretentious who show off their good taste in music and art. It's not that. Hipsters produce the many symbols that help us to orientate ourselves and make sense of and find meaning in the global digital age. Yeah? Here you find a wide array of artists, designers, thinkers, social entrepreneurs, writers and bloggers. They develop ideas of post-humanism, transhumanism, complexity, network research, participatory forms of politics and social movements, critique of wage labor, often irrational nature of work in the economy, ecological and social resilience, personal development, organizational development, new gender and sexual relations, forms of family, community life, and the interaction of cultures. So hipsters, I think this is a great definition. So I think the difference between them is these guys are more about taste, culture, symbolism, material artifacts, compared to hackers who are much more about tools and using technology as a means of changing society. And let's look at, so who identifies themselves with being a hipster here? According to this definition, you don't have to dress like them. Yes, exactly. You go for it. Yeah, show high up, guys. Come on, be brave. Yeah. Yes. Okay, good. We have some hipsters. Sorry for the stereotypical images. I just had to, put something visual there. There's so much text. Hippies are people who produce new lifestyles, habits, and practices that make life in post-industrial society happier, healthier, and perhaps more enchanted. I like that. They give a kind of positive flavor to things. Hippies here are not quite the same as the hippies of old, not just those starry-eyed New Agers who looked at astrology, crystals, transpersonal psychologies, and gurus, even though all of that is still fun. But rather people with highly developed skills in meditation, contemplation, bodily practices, psychedelics, diets, physical training, I would say biohackers, profound forms of intimate communication, sexuality, simple life wisdoms. You will find more rational and research-based approach to psychedelics, communities for self-development and eco-village living, science-driven meditation, stress release practices, this kind of wellness, goodness, actually feeling good, getting back in touch with yourself and others through all kinds of means, psychedelics or otherwise. This guy seems a little pro-psychedelic to me, which is kind of good. But otherwise, it's about mental states, spiritual experiences. That's kind of what he's trying to highlight. Again, they influence the symbols, but not as much as the hipsters. They're more about well-being. And the hipsters are more about the symbology, the fashion, the sensibilities of the post-industrial age, transhumanism, and so on. And then you have the hackers who actually have the tools and who are messing with it in a way through technology. Who would be the hippies in this room? Yes, there are some hippies as well. Yeah, great. Excellent. Rick is everything. I felt the same. I was like, but clearly it's a nice definition, right? So what I would like is that I would like your team to pick one archetype to work with. And you're going to essentially identify a desired behavior change you want in that archetype. And then you're going to essentially do the rest of the canvas, yeah, based on that. So, which ones would you like to pick? Okay, I'll just distribute them. You have 1, 2, 3. Okay. You guys are least. So could you two join the table here? Yeah, you two could join the table. You could join. One of you could join this. One of you could join.
Is this who we are, or who we're trying to?
You're trying to influence.
Yeah, from that.
The reason I asked who you are is because you can do a little reflection on what they're. Yes.
I think some steps, right?
You would
I don't think
So guys, would you, I'll ask, she's joining us. Would you guys like to work with hipsters, hippies, or? That's great, we have 3 teams. Yeah, I guess all these 3 are candid, they're not really sheeple. Yeah. People are the... But, guys, what was Okay, we asked. Alright, excellent. Hipsters here. You guys want hippies or hackers?
Hackers, maybe.
No, it's not. No, you guys are working with this. You're not a hippie or a hacker. It's not your work. You're a team of designers, behavior designers, trying to make a change in this archetype. The reason I asked who it is because you do a little bit of research, but you don't have to be this one. It's who you want to work with. In which archetype do you want to trigger a behavior change? Okay, I'm just gonna hand out. Right?
Yes.
Power. Yeah. I know. Light up. So the reason I asked is a hippie, for a show of hands, is that when you're working with a hippie, for example, this team, do you have any hippies here? You have one hippie there. So you would want to interview her through discussion on what is that behavior change you would like to make. So for that first part of the canvas, you want to understand what does the user, aka hippie or hacker, currently do. What is it we would like them to do? In order to give you that grounding, I just asked them. So it's a bit of internal research you can do, and the same for the others. And yeah, yes.
I have a question. Does it mean that we now thinking of a product that would change?
You're thinking, so when you think of a product, when you say product, solution, app, you're thinking of a solution already. Don't worry about it. You're thinking about what is the behavior you want to change in the individual. You have the individual there. That the individual has certain.
How we can do that at this point? We're not thinking about developing some app or something. Or
No, why would you? You're trying to change a behavior in somebody. Because how you change that behavior? See, this whole thing, you can fill this whole thing in without thinking of any manifestation, any media. Is it a newspaper? Is it an article? Is it a coupon? Is it direct mail? Is it an app? Is it an intervention on the street? Is it how you paint the car? How you change the behavior, this does not go into that at all.
At the same time, we're talking about digital behavior.
I would prefer that, but if it's going to limit you and it's uncomfortable, it depends. If you work with digital all the time, that's what you do. But I would prefer that. Yeah. But again, when you say digital, at this stage you don't have to worry about that at all, because you're only saying, I'm a hipster, and try not to think that how hipsters do it, because you are you're working with a stereotype. Rather ask the hipster in your group, right? Ask them, like, hey, typically because of certain characteristics that you have on the paper, or what is that behavior you would like to change in a very concrete way for your own good? Yeah? Target the behavior change, see if there's motivation, and then try to actually build a habit out of it.
Even though we don't have to think of any particular product or app, still like behavior, if it's an action, there are so many different actions that we commit. Like,
Yeah.
So shall we pick one or just think about this?
I would say pick a few. Pick a few, because every single behavior you want to change has its implication. You have to figure out the motivation around it. And think about, is it internal, external, intrinsic or extrinsic? What is the direction of motivation? Right? So the fewer behaviors you target, the more deep you can go into the canvas on the other parts. If you have a long list of behaviors, each of them you will have to validate. Is the motivation there?
It's empty.
Right? So today is just the first time. I've been working on this for years, and it's not, it's not just obvious. So
Yes,
it is obvious, but it also takes time. So I will give you maybe 20 minutes for you to decide on what is the target behavior, or what is the desired behavior change you want. Okay, should I give a break? It's done now. Thanks.